The research vessel, Quiet Observer, drifted through the dead zone of Sector 447, a region of space that no species had visited in over 3,000 years. Captain Vexerin stood at the command station, her four eyes scanning the sensor readings with growing unease. The Korthari expedition had been sent to investigate an ancient signal that had suddenly appeared after millennia of silence. "Captain, I am detecting a massive structure ahead," Science Officer Thrawn announced, his voice carrying the tremor that came naturally to his species when they encountered the unknown. "It appears to be a vessel of some kind, but the design matches nothing in our databases." Vexerin moved closer to the display screen. The ship that appeared before them was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their research vessel, and its hull was covered in sharp angles and aggressive lines that seemed to promise violence. Where most civilized species designed their ships with smooth curves and elegant forms, this vessel looked like it had been built by someone who expected to fight every moment of its existence. "Any identification markers?" she asked. "None that I can translate, Captain. However, there are symbols on the hull that appear repeatedly. They might be a language, but our systems cannot process them." Lieutenant Jorn, the youngest member of the crew, stepped forward with obvious fear in his movements. "Captain, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." This region of space was declared forbidden by the Galactic Council for a reason. The records say that something terrible happened here, something that caused every species to agree that this place should never be visited again. Perhaps we should report our findings and leave. Vexerin considered his words carefully. The young officer was not wrong. The warnings about Sector 447 were clear and absolute, but the scientific community had dismissed them as superstition. After all, how could an entire sector of space be dangerous? The signal that had brought them here promised answers to questions that had plagued researchers for generations. "We will proceed with caution," she decided. "Thrawn, can you determine if the vessel is powered?" The science officer ran his scans again, and when he spoke, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Captain, the ship appears to be in a dormant state. Power levels are minimal, just enough to maintain basic systems. However, I am detecting something strange. There are biological containment units on board, and they are still active." "Biological containment? You mean stasis pods?" "Yes, Captain. 12 of them, and according to my readings, they are occupied." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Somewhere on that ancient, terrifying vessel, there were living beings who had been sleeping for 3,000 years, waiting for something to wake them up. Medical Officer Pren spoke up, her voice careful and measured. "Captain, if there are survivors on that ship, we have a moral obligation to investigate. They may need medical assistance. 3,000 years in stasis would cause significant physical degradation." "Or they may be prisoners," Jorn countered. "Locked away for crimes so terrible that their captors decided death was too kind." "Enough speculation," Vexerin commanded. "We will send a team to investigate. Thrawn, you will lead. Take Pren and 2 security officers. Your mission is reconnaissance only. Do not touch anything, do not activate anything, and if you encounter any sign of danger, you return immediately." The team prepared themselves in the shuttle bay, checking their equipment and reviewing the scan data that Thrawn had collected. The ancient ship had what appeared to be a docking port on its lower section, though whether it would accept their shuttle was uncertain. "I do not like this," Pren admitted as they boarded the shuttle. "Everything about that vessel feels wrong. Look at the design, all those weapons ports, all that armor. This was not a ship built for exploration or trade. This was built for war." Thrawn could not disagree. His initial scans had revealed no fewer than 40 weapon emplacements on the hull, along with armor plating that was thicker than anything the Galactic Council currently used. Whoever had built this ship had expected to face enemies of tremendous power. The shuttle crossed the distance between the two vessels in just a few minutes. As they approached the docking port, the ancient ship seemed to sense their presence. Lights began to flicker along its hull, weak and uncertain at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. "The ship is responding to us," Theron reported back to the quiet observer. "It appears to be preparing to receive our shuttle." "Proceed carefully," Captain Vexrin responded. "At the first sign of trouble, you get out of there." The docking clamps engaged, and the team made their way through the airlock into the ancient vessel. The interior was dark, illuminated only by emergency lighting that cast everything in a deep red glow. The air was cold and stale, but breathable. "The atmosphere is acceptable," Pren confirmed. "Nitrogen and oxygen mix, similar to what several species require. Whoever built this ship breathed air much like we do." They moved through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were covered in writing that none of them could read, along with images that showed bipedal creatures in what appeared to be combat gear. The creatures had only 2 eyes, 4 limbs, and flat faces with small noses and mouths. They looked fragile, almost delicate. And yet the images showed them fighting against creatures many times their size. "What species is this?" one of the security officers asked. Theron studied the images carefully. "I do not know. They do not match any species in the Galactic Registry, current or historical." "They look so weak," the other security officer observed. "How could beings this small build a ship this powerful?" Pren was about to respond when her medical scanner began to alert. "The stasis pods are nearby. I am reading life signs, faint but steady. We should hurry. After 3,000 years, they may not have much time left." The team followed her scanner to a large chamber at the center of the ship. Inside, arranged in 2 rows of 6, were the stasis pods that Theron had detected. They were made of a dark metal with small windows that showed the beings inside. Theron approached the nearest pod and looked through the window. Inside, he saw one of the creatures from the images on the walls. It was smaller than he had expected, with pale skin and dark hair. Its eyes were closed, and its chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. "It is alive," he whispered. "After all this time, it is still alive." And then, without warning, the creature's eyes opened. Theron stumbled backward as the creature's eyes locked onto him. They were a strange color, like the minerals found in deep caves, and they held an intelligence that was sharp and immediate. The creature did not appear confused or disoriented. It appeared to be assessing him, measuring him, deciding whether he was a threat. The stasis pod began to hiss as the seal broke. Medical Officer Pren rushed forward with her scanner, desperately trying to get readings on the awakening being. "Its vital signs are increasing rapidly," she reported. "Heart rate, brain activity, everything is coming online much faster than should be possible. This species has remarkable recovery capabilities." The pod lid opened fully, and the creature sat up. It moved with careful precision, each motion controlled and deliberate. When it stood, Theron saw that it was shorter than him by nearly a head, with a body that looked soft and vulnerable. But there was something in the way it carried itself that made him deeply uncomfortable. The creature spoke. The words were strange, harsh sounds that their translation devices could not process. When no one responded, it tried again in a different language, then another, cycling through what must have been a dozen different forms of speech. "I do not understand," Theron said slowly, hoping the creature might comprehend his meaning through tone alone. The creature paused, then nodded. It raised one of its hands and pointed to itself. "Human," it said clearly. Then it pointed at Theron with a questioning look. "Korthari," Theron responded, pointing to himself. "I am Korthari." "Korthari," the human repeated, testing the word. It looked around the chamber at its companions, still sleeping in their pods, and something changed in its expression. A hardness entered its eyes that had not been there before. "Where are the others?" the human asked, the meaning clear despite the language barrier. It gestured to the empty space around them, then to the ship itself. Theron did not know how to answer. He understood the question, but he did not have a response that would make sense. How could he explain that 3,000 years had passed? That whatever civilization had built this ship was long gone? The human seemed to understand his silence. It moved to a control panel on the wall and began pressing buttons, its fingers moving with practiced familiarity. Lights came on throughout the chamber, and screens flickered to life, displaying information in the strange writing that covered the walls. Pren approached cautiously. "We should contact the captain," she said quietly. "This situation is beyond our ability to handle." Before Theron could agree, an alarm began to sound throughout the ship. The human froze, its body going rigid with tension. It barked something that sounded like a command, and then it was moving. Faster than any being that size should be able to move. "Follow it," Theron ordered. "We need to know what is happening." They chased the human through the corridors of the ancient ship, struggling to keep pace. It ran without hesitation, navigating the twisting passages as though it had walked them 1,000 times. When it reached a large door marked with warning symbols, it pressed its hand against a scanner. The door refused to open. The human pressed its hand again, harder this time, but still the door remained sealed. "The system requires biological verification," Theron realized. "After 3,000 years, it may no longer recognize you." The human understood. Without any hesitation, it reached down to its leg where a small knife was attached to its clothing. It drew the blade across its palm, opening a wound that immediately began to bleed. Pren gasped. "What are you doing? You will injure yourself!" The human ignored her. It pressed its bleeding hand against the scanner, and this time, the ship responded. The door slid open with a sound that rumbled through the entire vessel, and lights began to activate throughout the structure. But it was not just the lights. Theron felt the ship come alive around them, systems that had been dormant for millennia, suddenly powering up with terrifying speed. The floor vibrated beneath his feet, and he could hear the deep hum of engines coming online. "Captain Vexrin," he called through his communicator. "The ship is reactivating. The human used its blood to access the security systems. Get out of there immediately," the captain commanded. "That is an order." But it was already too late. The ancient vessel's systems were fully operational now, and Theron watched in horror as weapon ports began to extend from the hull. Targeting arrays activated, scanners swept the surrounding space, and shield generators powered up to full capacity. The human stood in the center of what appeared to be a command bridge, its hands moving across multiple control panels simultaneously. Despite its small size, despite the blood still dripping from its wounded hand, it controlled the massive warship with complete authority. And then the screens showed them what the human had seen. Another fleet was approaching Sector 447, a fleet of ships that bore markings Theron recognized immediately. "The Vrak Dominion," he whispered. The Vrak were one of the most feared species in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved entire populations, and showed no mercy to anyone who stood in their way. If they were coming to this sector, it could only mean that they had detected the same signal that had brought the quiet observer here. The human was watching the approaching fleet with an expression that Theron could not identify. It was not fear. Despite being outnumbered by hundreds of ships, it was not anger, though the Vrak were clearly hostile. If anything, it looked like anticipation. The human turned to face the research team. It spoke slowly, using gestures to help communicate its meaning. It pointed to itself, then to the ancient ship, then to the Vrak fleet. Finally, it made a pushing motion toward Theron and his companions, pointing in the direction of their shuttle. "It wants us to leave," Pren interpreted. "It is going to fight the Vrak alone." "That is suicide," one of the security officers protested. "There are hundreds of wrack ships. This vessel cannot possibly defeat them all." But looking at the human, at the calm certainty in its strange eyes, Theron was not so sure. He had seen the weapons on this ship. He had seen the armor, the design, the writing on the walls that spoke of countless battles. And he had seen how quickly the ship had responded to the human's blood, as though it had been waiting all this time for its master to return. "We must go," he decided. "This is not our fight." They ran back through the corridors to their shuttle, the ship vibrating around them as it continued to power up. When they reached the docking port, Theron looked back one last time. The human was standing at the bridge window, watching them leave. It raised one hand in what might have been a salute or a farewell, and then the ancient ship began to move, its engines firing with a power that made the stars themselves seem to tremble. The shuttle detached and raced back to the quiet observer. Captain Vexrin was waiting for them, her expression a mixture of fear and fascination. "Report," she demanded. "The being called itself human," Theron explained. "It used its blood to reactivate the ship's systems. The vessel appears to have been designed specifically for that species, requiring biological material to function, and now it is preparing to engage the Vrak fleet." The captain turned to the main view screen, where the ancient human ship was accelerating toward the hundreds of wrack vessels. It was a scene that should have been tragic. A single ship against an armada, certain death for anyone foolish enough to attempt it. But as they watched, the human ship opened fire. The first volley of weapons erased 12 Vrak vessels from existence. The second volley took out 20 more. The Vrak returned fire, but their weapons splashed harmlessly against the human ship's shields. It moved through their formation like a predator through prey, destroying everything in its path with casual, almost contemptuous ease. "What is this?" Vexrin breathed. "What have we awakened?" Theron had no answer. He could only watch as the human, alone and outnumbered, began to methodically destroy the most feared fleet in the known galaxy. The battle lasted less than an hour. The Vrak Dominion had brought 347 warships to claim whatever treasure they believed waited in Sector 447. When the human was finished, not a single one remained. Captain Vexrin had ordered the quiet observer to retreat to a safe distance, but safe felt like a meaningless word now. They had just witnessed something that should have been impossible, a single ship annihilating a fleet that could have conquered most of the known galaxy. The implications were terrifying. "Captain, the human ship is hailing us," the communications officer reported, his voice unsteady. Vexrin straightened in her command chair. "Open a channel." The view screen flickered, and the human appeared. It had bandaged its wounded hand, and there were signs of exhaustion on its face. But its eyes were as sharp and alert as they had been when it first awakened. Behind it, Vexrin could see the other stasis pods beginning to open. The human spoke, and this time, the translation systems had learned enough to provide a rough interpretation. "Your translation matrix has adapted well," the human said. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Forces. My crew and I thank you for waking us. We have been asleep for a very long time." Vexrin found her voice. "Commander Chen, I am Captain Vexrin of the Korthari research vessel Quiet Observer. We came to investigate a signal from this sector. We did not expect to find this." "The signal was a beacon," Commander Chen explained. "We activated it before we entered stasis. It was designed to call for help if we ever needed it, or to warn others if our enemies returned." "The Vrak?" "No. We had never encountered the Vrak before today. Our enemies were far worse." The commander's expression darkened. 3,000 years ago, humanity fought a war for survival against a species called the Hierarchy. They believed that all other forms of life were inferior, fit only for extermination. They destroyed hundreds of worlds before we stopped them. Theron stepped forward, unable to contain his questions. How did you stop them? The Vrak were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, and you destroyed them in less than an hour. What kind of species builds weapons like this? Commander Chen was quiet for a moment before answering. A desperate one, she said finally. Humanity was not always a warrior species. We were explorers, scientists, dreamers. When the hierarchy came, we tried to negotiate. We tried to reason with them. They responded by burning our colony worlds and harvesting our people for genetic experiments. She paused, and the other humans began to gather behind her. They were all different sizes and colors, but they shared the same hard look in their eyes. We learned very quickly that some enemies cannot be reasoned with, the commander continued. Some threats can only be answered with force. So we built ships like this one, weapons that could match the hierarchy's power and exceed it. We turned ourselves into soldiers because the alternative was extinction. Captain Vexrin processed this information carefully. The battle with the hierarchy, how did it end? We won. But the cost was terrible. Earth was scarred, our population was decimated, and most of our fleet was destroyed. This ship, the Prometheus, was damaged in the final battle and drifted into this sector. We entered stasis hoping that someone would find us before our systems failed completely. 3,000 years, Pren said softly. You were asleep for 3,000 years, and the first thing you did when you woke up was fight another battle. Commander Chen smiled, but it was a sad smile. We are good at fighting. It is not something we are proud of, but it is something we are very, very good at. When I saw the Vrak fleet approaching, I recognized what they were. Conquerors. Slavers. The same kind of evil we faced before, wearing different faces. One of the other humans stepped forward, a tall man with dark skin and silver streaks in his hair. Permission to speak, Commander? Granted. Lieutenant Park. Captain Vexrin? Lieutenant Park addressed her directly. We understand that our sudden appearance must be alarming. A species you have never encountered, armed with weapons that outclass anything in your current arsenal. You must have many questions about our intentions. The thought had occurred to me, Vexrin admitted. Then let me be direct. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We fought the hierarchy to survive, not to become like them. If your Galactic Council will accept us, we would like to join as members, not as rulers. We want to be part of civilization, not stand apart from it. The captain considered this carefully. The humans had proven themselves capable of tremendous violence, but they had also shown restraint. They could have destroyed the quiet observer with no effort at all. But instead, they had let the research team go free. And they had engaged the Vrak only after seeing that the fleet was hostile. Why should we trust you? She asked bluntly. Commander Chen nodded, as though she had expected this question. You should not trust us based on words alone. Words are easy. But consider our actions. We have been awake for less than 2 hours. In that time, we could have claimed this sector as our territory. We could have demanded payment for saving your ship from the Vrak. We could have done many things that a hostile species would do. Instead, we are asking permission to exist alongside you, Lieutenant Park added. We are offering our technology and our protection to the Galactic Council, freely given with no conditions attached. All we ask in return is a place to belong. Theron was studying the sensor data from the battle, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. Your weapons, he said. They were able to penetrate Vrak shields, as though they did not exist. How is that possible? Our technology was designed to fight the hierarchy, Commander Chen explained. They had shields that could absorb almost any form of energy attack. So we developed weapons that did not use energy. Our primary armament fires projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. No shield can absorb that kind of kinetic impact. And your own shields? The Vrak hit you with everything they had, and your defenses never even flickered. Our shields are layered with multiple redundant systems. The outer layer absorbs energy, the middle layer deflects kinetic impacts, and the inner layer is a gravitational field that catches anything that makes it through the first two. The hierarchy taught us to expect enemies who would not stop attacking until we were dead, so we built defenses that could withstand anything. Captain Vexerin made her decision. I will contact the Galactic Council and inform them of your existence and your request for membership. I cannot promise what they will decide, but I will advocate on your behalf. That is all we ask, Commander Chen said. There is one more thing, Vexerin added. My science officer, Theron, observed that your ship required biological material to fully activate. Specifically, it required human blood. Why? The commander's expression grew serious. The Prometheus was designed as a last resort weapon, too dangerous to be activated by accident or by an enemy who managed to capture it. The only way to bring it to full power is with human DNA, delivered through blood. It ensures that no one can turn our own weapons against us. And if all humans were killed, the ship would never activate again. That is correct. Humanity's greatest weapons are bound to humanity itself. If we die, they die with us. It was our way of ensuring that our creations could never be used to harm innocent people after we were gone. The communication ended, and Captain Vexerin sat back in her chair, trying to process everything she had learned. The humans were a species of contradictions, capable of incredible violence but also profound restraint. Builders of terrible weapons who had designed those weapons to die with them rather than fall into the wrong hands. Theron approached her station. Captain, what do you think the Council will decide? I think they will be afraid, she said honestly. The humans represent a power that no one in the galaxy can match. That kind of power makes people nervous. But they saved us from the Vrak. They could have destroyed us and did not. Does that not count for something? Vexerin looked at the view screen, where the Prometheus hung in space like a sleeping predator. Even at rest, it radiated menace. But she had seen the way Commander Chen had looked at her crew, the care and affection in her eyes. She had seen the sadness when the humans spoke of their history, the weight of all those battles, all those losses. It counts for a great deal, she decided. The humans are not monsters. They are survivors. They did what they had to do to protect themselves and their families, and when the war was over, they tried to sleep away the violence they had learned. But now they are awake again. Yes, and the galaxy will have to decide what to do with them. But I know what I believe. She stood and faced her crew. I believe that when the next threat comes, and it will come eventually, I would rather have humans standing beside us than against us. They may be terrifying, but they are terrifying because they had to be. And I think if we give them a chance, they can learn to be something else. The quiet observer turned toward home, carrying with it news that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the Prometheus followed at a respectful distance, its weapons powered down, its crew awakening one by one from their long sleep. Humanity had returned to the stars, and this time they hoped to find something better than war waiting for them.